Jesus, please don't be mad. I know that it makes you sad when I simply don't obey.
Okay, welcome to Faiths of Appalachia, hidden stories of faiths and value. This is a podcast where we explore personal stories of spirituality in the midst of a complicated culture, especially a culture like Central Appalachia where everything is seen as monocultural. We want to dive into personal stories of hearing really just a lived out experience from people. I'm Rob Music, I'm a chaplain and priest. I want to give a special big thanks to our grant sponsor, the National Endowment for the Humanities, Kentucky Humanities. And today, my guest is George Thornberry, who I have appreciated for many years. I mean, really, just ever since I've gotten to know you, George, I admire your openness, your curiosity, but especially, like, you love to learn. And what I've really taken from you is this willingness to, I mean, if you learn something that counters one of your beliefs, you're willing to lean in as opposed to shut it off. If you learn something that opens your eyes, like, you lean in. And to me, that just stands out in our world where so often people shut down the exploration of truth. And of course, also, you do bring this perspective of a unique movement that not many people have heard about.
That's right.
So, George, tell us a little bit about you, who you are.
All right, I can do that. My name is George Thornberry. I was born and raised in Pikeville. I left here when I was about 23. I went to Florida. My brother was there. He was working at the Kennedy Space Center.
Cool.
And I was fortunate enough to get a job with Transworld Airlines. I was there about 6 years, 8 years. During that time I was in the Army 2 years. And then when I returned to Florida, soon after that, that was in the late 60s. And I've been curious all my life about religion and what to believe. I do recall that when I was young and we attended a Methodist church, I became a member. And I recall being taught many things in Sunday school class. And some of them were questionable and debatable. And I also recall that I did not embrace all the doctrines they had.
So
I reserved that,
even as a little kid.
even as a young kid and as a teenager. Some things did not sit well with me, so I held them in reserve. And in fact, sometimes they created more than questions, they created a little turmoil. And my family life was not the best. I had a wonderful mother and a wonderful father until he was drunk. And that created a lot of tension and disharmony and feelings of being inadequate and all those things that go along with it. And then I left home and went to Florida. In 1968, I was in a bookstore in Cocoa, Florida, and I was looking to see what they had. And I saw a stack of books with a white cover. I'd never seen a book like that. It was rather large and thick.
Kind of like, just like this.
Yes. Like this.
Okay.
And I bought the book, and I looked through the index, and it had some strange things in there. And I was curious, so I bought it. And I think it was $10 at that time.
So a commitment, a big commitment.
I looked through it, and they were talking about different colored races, the blue and the green and the orange and white and black and brown. And of course we know the Indians were almost eradicated. So it's not hard to understand that some of the other colored races may have been eradicated.
So you open this book, and it's starting to tell you some things that for some people would feel like it's way far out.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It sounds that way.
But you actually leaned in.
Well, because I would not discount the book just for one thing that I'd never heard of.
Tell me about that. Like, what makes you decide to lean in when something at first seems kind of far-fetched?
Well, I'm like a lot of people. I want truth. Most people, if they're thinking very much, they want truth. They have questions. They want answers. And for me, this book has the answers. And a lot of people refer to it as the aha book.
Oh, okay, so they call it the aha book.
Because you read something and you think about it and you say, aha, that's why things are the way they are. Aha.
That's so here you are. So you're in the bookstore in, did you say Cocoa, Florida?
Cocoa, Florida.
Cocoa, Florida. You start reading the book, and then for you, when did it become like more than a book? Kind of actually like, wow, I could shape my life on this.
Well, I put it on the bookshelf. And then the same year I got married in 1970, I saw an ad in the paper. A guy named Paul Mazie, he had a book, and he wanted to start a study group about it. So I think, well, I have a book. I want to find out about it. So I called him, and I went to the meeting. I've been in meetings ever since.
So 55 years ago, you went to a meeting and you haven't stopped.
Right.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean,
it talks about Lucifer and the rebellion, the first people, 994,000 years ago, and they were very primitive.
mm-hmm.
The first humans. The qualification to become a human in the spiritual realm is for these creatures, whatever they are, pre-humans,
Okay,
primitive humans,
okay.
to have the concept, to have the mentality, to recognize some type of deity.
Hmm.
And if they can have the capacity to recognize a deity of whatever kind, they're designated as humans. Science does not have a solid definition for humans. They have about 15 different definitions.
Okay, so what you're saying is now, in this kind of approach or philosophy, when a person when a person can become God conscious, that's actually what makes a person a person.
A person or human.
Yeah, okay. So it makes you a human when you have God
With a
consciousness.
spiritual character or potential.
Okay, spiritual potential comes as you have the capacity for.
The mental capacity.
Ah, interesting. Okay,
And if you examine it and you think about it, it holds up.
I mean, that's a really interesting. So, I mean, I want to go back real quick. So, when you're growing up and you're in Sunday school or you're in youth group, and you start having these like this doesn't fit with me. Was there ever one major issue that really had you saying like, I'm going to quietly keep this to myself, but I can't buy into this?
Well, there are a lot of stories in the Bible, and they're good because they have a lot of truth in them, whether they're factually true or not.
Okay.
You know, Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm.
Could it happen? Sure it could. Did it? I don't know. So I do have questions about that.
Okay, so it's really, like the Bible for you could be having some truth in it, but you have some questions about
Oh, sure.
all the details of it.
The Bible is probably the greatest book ever written in our world. But there are questions.
Yeah.
It has truth, but it has some things that are very questionable.
Yeah.
And that's one reason people look for answers. If they don't have the answers, we look somewhere else.
I think that's a really helpful to frame. It's the idea that for you can hold the Bible as this great book that has really important value for yourself and for the world, but also in those gaps or in those questions, like you have the space to explore and figure it out. Okay, so thanks for that. I was curious about if there was some kind of issue that really,
Just a handful
Okay.
or a number of issues.
Because you have a little more years on you than I do, I suspect that probably, late 60s, well, I guess even before you go to Florida, in the 60s, if you were to raise those questions in church, would that have been okay?
Well, I'm not the type of person that would challenge authority, especially at that young age. I wasn't qualified. I didn't have the confidence to speak and challenge anyone.
Okay.
And I didn't have any other view to present.
Right. So you just have some questions. So then go to the bookstore, start going to meetings, and as you are then spiritually curious and you're going to these meetings and you're learning about Urantia, kind of give us maybe a little bit of overview. Most people have never heard about Urantia. Right. I have to admit, George, I had never heard about it until I met you.
Right.
Okay. And now I've learned a lot about it. Kind of give us an overview of your rancho, the rancho book.
How much time do we have? It covers so many topics. It covers the beginning of our universe and the way we understand it, different definitions of God, the nature of God, the personality of God, the mercy of God. And these are not just paragraphs, but pages explaining that, how the universe is organized. There's a huge hierarchy of spiritual beings in the universe that help coordinate everything we know about. It does an excellent job of merging science and religion together. There's a section in the book about physics. And I can read that, and I have read the physics section and the science section because it was printed in 1955. It's been around a while.
Okay, so the book was printed in 1955.
1955.
Okay.
Then, several years ago, I read an article about the oldest rocks on the planet, and they had discovered these around Hudson Bay in Canada.
Oh, okay.
I think that would maybe have been in the early aughts, early 200s. And I'm thinking, well, I've already read that. It specifies in the book that the oldest rocks on the planet are around Hudson Bay.
Okay, so the rancho book already tells you that.
Yes.
Interesting.
And there are other examples, several of them. I've clipped articles out of magazines because I've read it before, and I stick it in a book.
Okay, so when you start running into stuff that verifies what you've read, you say, okay, I'm going to put this together.
Oh, sure. In recent years, they've determined, to their satisfaction, that the Neanderthals merged with humans. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Now, they have the DNA. We're all supposed to have about 2% Neanderthal DNA. Okay. That story is in this book.
So it's already been, before science says it, the book has already talked about it.
They explain that back when Neanderthals were here, they merged with humans and were absorbed into the white race.
Wow.
And they stated as fact.
So the book then really is about cosmic origins, human origins, like you said, kind of different names for God, tells you about the fall of Lucifer.
40 pages about the fall of Lucifer.
So 40 pages.
Yes.
Wow.
Lucifer, of course, we know was a brilliant angel. And he was in charge of the spiritual development on, I think, like 1,000 planets. And that was his job. He was good. Until he fell in love with himself, and we know the story. He denied the existence of God, and he wanted to take over.
Okay, well, I'm going to pause you there for a second because you said something that catches my attention. You said 1,000 planets.
Yeah.
Thousands of planets, I think is what you said.
Right.
Okay, so the book's going to go beyond Earth.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm getting to the
sorry.
Interesting point.
Okay.
Then, his rebellion, there were 37 inhabited planets that followed his leadership into a rebellion. Our world was one of those.
Okay.
And since then, we have been quarantined.
Oh, have to be careful using that word.
I know, out of the mainstream of spiritual connection with the rest of the universe. So there's a reason we feel isolated spiritually, because we are. And rebellion still exists on this planet.
So the cosmic or existential aloneness that we feel, right? And people have different ways of masking it.
Sure.
You're saying, because the book argues, that it comes because we're a part of the 37 planets that rebelled.
Well, what was the question?
So we're talking about the feeling of aloneness, alienation, separateness. It comes because of this rebellion.
That's a big part of it, yes.
Okay.
And the other part is human nature.
Okay, so there's a part of human nature too.
We're created imperfectly.
Mm.
And we have an urge to become better and think better and live better.
So we were created imperfect.
Yes, to become perfect. In fact, you know, In the New Testament, Jesus says, become perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. He said that.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
That's a commandment. They have a plan.
Okay. So this innate desire I have for self-improvement, development, perfection, it's actually given by God.
It is built in.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And so we're given this to like the drive, the push to move forward. But then the question would be like, how do we do that?
Yes.
And what's the answer? How do we do that?
And that's one of the questions that's hard to answer, because we ask God, a lot of people ask God, what do I do now?
Yeah.
What should I do? What's my purpose? And it's confusing because the connection is not like it would be.
What do you mean by that? Tell me that.
Well, the quarantine,
Okay.
those spiritual connection to this planet, the circuits have been disrupted and restrained. So, but still, when Christ was here, he did things that reconnected a lot of those, not all of them. He did many things that made the world difference. And that's another story about why he was here and what happened when he was here.
Well, that lifts up the questions for us. So here's this book that you said it was written in 1955.
Right.
That mentions, like you said, 40 pages on the fall of Lucifer. It talks about planets. It talks about Neanderthals. It talks about physics. And now you're saying it talks about Jesus. Is there a lot about Jesus in the book?
Okay. Trick question. There's 700 pages out of the 2,100 pages about the life and teachings of Jesus.
Wow.
And where he was those missing years.
Okay, so literally 1/3 of the text
Right.
is about Jesus.
Yes.
So is this like a Christian book that like you could tack on to the Bible, or how do you see it?
Well, I couldn't find the other book I wanted to bring. It was a paramony.
Okay.
It was a marriage between the Urantia book and the Bible. And it has like 30-some thousand references, because much of the information in here came from the Bible.
Okay.
It was reworded and filled the gaps in.
Wow. Okay. So 700, I mean 40 pages about the fall of Lucifer is already kind of mind-blowing, right? Because the Bible makes just very, very brief references to it. So now you have 40 pages on that, 700 pages on Jesus, which that's a lot bigger than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right?
Well, it gives a year-by-year account.
Okay. So I literally could walk through every year of Jesus' life in this book.
Yeah, and of course in his childhood years there was not a lot going on, but a lot of the background is explained.
Okay. So again, kind of fill in those gaps of where you feel like, where a lot of people would read the story and say, I wonder about, when Jesus was in the years wandering,
Well, what happened to his father? And people are curious about that, and I think some theologians have determined or concluded that something happened to Joseph and he died, and he did, according to this story. He was a contractor, and in building something he had an accident, and when Jesus was 14, his father died.
Okay.
So Jesus took over being a father, and he gained the experience of being a father, a human father.
So at 14, he's got to start caring for the family.
On.
Wow.
And he stayed at home until his oldest brother, or younger, the first brother under him,
Yeah.
was mature enough to take the leadership of the family.
Okay. So definitely not like Jesus having cousins. These are brothers that Jesus said. Okay. So let's back up then. This is, I mean, like we do when we talk. This is like an onion, right? There's so many layers you can start really going. Let's go back. Let me ask the big question. So with Urantia, you discovered this when you were in Florida. Person puts out an ad, say, I want to start a meeting. But then this begs the question, like, where does this book come from? Right?
The $64
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. So how do you answer that? Where does this book come from?
Well, there's several different answers.
Okay.
But we're acquainted with the idea that a lot of the information in the Bible was spiritually inspired. Okay. The same idea applies to this.
Okay.
except it's more detailed because they name the author of a different section or a different paragraph or a different uh, well, paragraph. No, it's a chapter,
Okay.
and
So
they call a chapter a book, or what do they call that? Not a book, paper. They call it
okay.
paper. Yeah, I think there's 197 pages of chapters
Okay, so 197 papers or chapters, and these then are like divine revelations to different people?
to everyone.
Okay, to everyone. And but then someone's responsible for putting it in book form.
Right.
And who was responsible for putting it in book form? Do we know?
There was a doctor,
Okay.
a surgeon. He became a psychiatrist in Chicago in the early 20s. I don't recall what year he was born, but he was a doctor. His wife was also a doctor. And one evening, when they were living, I imagine, in an apartment building, someone down the hall, lady came and knocked on his door and said that her husband would not wake up, and they could not awake him.
Oh my gosh.
But he was making strange sounds and talking and saying things. And the short version is that this individual, who we don't know his name, they've kept that hidden because they did not want him to be verified.
Mm.
But over the years, they developed a group of people to listen to him and write down what he was saying. He became the radio receiver.
Okay.
His mind and his voice was used to receive the information.
Okay, so this is starting to help clarify things. When we think about other religious traditions, there may be the prophet who receives the vision of an angel, or an angel comes. But here you have a person in this random place who becomes the, like your words, radio receiver, starts having like divine utterances or some kind of communication. So this doctor and his wife, they start recording these things.
Well, over time, it developed that the doctor started inviting friends in once a week to these sessions, and they would submit a list of questions.
Okay.
And then the next week they would they would have the answers. And a lot of people are uncertain about exactly how they did that. Excuse me. How they got the answers, and it became sort of a secret thing. But we can only hear or read something or receive an information in our mind even and write it down. So they don't go into a lot of detail about the methods they use, but I imagine they use several different methods.
Okay, so for a book that's 2,100 pages long that gives really, really interesting details of things like Lucifer's fall, Jesus' life, the hidden years, all that kind of stuff. The way that the transmissions happen, there's not much detail on that.
Right.
It's just transmissions happen. People wrote these down, and then is there any explanation of what made them then like kind of put all these papers together?
Well, over the years, with the doctor and the help of the 70 people that gathered as a committee,
Oh, okay. So there were 70 people that gathered as a committee.
and over a period of time, those people would change. Some drop out, and others would come in. They started writing all this information down, and I think this started in the early 20s.
Okay.
So, and then I think they had a period of revision,
Mm,
and the people would ask questions, they would get the answers.
okay.
So a lot of it was not because the angelic beings were giving the information; they were responding to questions people had, just like they do now.
Okay. So more like almost like a divine Q&A,
Yeah.
answering some questions. So now, yeah. So Urantia really is about 100-year-old movement,
Right.
and now the reason why I love hanging out with you, George. I mean, obviously you're an older man, and you've been in the movement for 55 years, or like you said, going to meetings for 55 years. So over half of the movement's time, you've been in it.
Yeah.
You've been seriously a study, and I'm assuming that in 1970, when you go to meetings, I mean, the book's only been out 15 years.
Right.
So if it started in 55, you pick it up in 70, you start diving in. So really, you're one of the earliest people in this tradition, right? And here you are in Pikeville, which is really cool. So you've moved from, a lot of people will either sit in a pew or whatever, and they just kind of are, I don't want to say surface, but they can be kind of surface in whatever spiritual practice they're in. You're not surface. I mean, you're in it to win it. You are deep into this.
Well, sure.
So what makes you, twofold question really, George, is like, why are you so serious about it? But then also, just in a climate that we live in where people maybe are not as serious about faith and spirituality, what makes you so, like, I mean, you're willing to, like, you go out, pass out pamphlets, you share, you buy the book for people. I mean, you hold meetings.
This movement has grown to be worldwide now. And I started younger, of course, but a lot of people feel the same way, and more so than I do. They're more committed, they do more things. I do what I can do. It answers questions, and we all love to have our questions answered. And they make us feel better about ourselves and about our future. And it removes questions that we don't need. We have the answers. It makes us feel better about everything. It enables me to love people more. And that always helps. But there are also a lot of good Christian people, a lot of good spiritual people around the world who love other people. And they may be confused theologically, and that's okay. That's not a hindrance. Their love is still love, and it's a commanding force.
Yeah, so really, I guess what you're sharing then is, like, you do this because, you love people, you love the truth, you love getting your answers.
That's my goal.
Okay.
In fact, I'm still working on this part, but my number one goal in life is to learn how to love people more.
That is a really powerful life commitment, is to
Well,
grow in love. And
I think it's in our Bible to learn how to love people and to love people.
I do remember
that's a
someone
commandment.
saying that is, the great commandment is to love God and love others. I think I remember that somewhere. But,
that's the first commandment. First three commandments are love the Lord your God with all your strength and might,
yeah, that's right,
and your neighbor
as yourself.
as yourself. And that makes three commandments in one.
Okay, because you got to love yourself, and then you got to love others.
Love your neighbor.
I gotcha. So, but to kind of auger down on this a little bit more. So when you bring up, a track, kind of a book or whatever, so often people just tell you, like, no.
Oh, sure.
Or they might say more than no, right? Have you ever had an encounter that, like, really got uncomfortable and you thought, oh, should I do this anymore?
Oh, no. I have had rejections,
Okay.
but they don't last very long because I withdraw.
Mm.
And Jesus withdrew from his encounters with people that were not open to him. So that's a lesson to think about.
Okay, so just like Christ, when he says, hey, dust your feet off and move on, you just dust your feet off and you move on. So what I'm hearing in this is that, as you practice your faith, right, what are some things that help? I mean, obviously the study of the book is really helpful. Is there anything else that's helpful for you as you practice your faith?
Just in my daily life, just keep talking to God.
Okay, so prayer becomes a
Prayer.
really important thing, right?
And good prayer is conversing with God.
So as you converse with God, and obviously this deep commitment you have to grow in love, loving yourself, loving others, loving God. We live in an age where religious exclusivism is so important, or is so key, right? It's like you're gonna be this, and you can't be anything else, right?
That can be a problem.
Yeah. So tell me, so with the Urantia, it sounds like a person could see themselves as a Christian and as a person who's following the book.
Oh, sure. Yes, I still attend church. A lot of, when I go to a conference, there are people there from all different backgrounds and religions. I've met Mormons there, uh, Jewish people, Muslims attend, the whole gamut. They're welcome.
But it's not like a secret society where you have to pay a fee or know a special knock or anything like that. It's just if you're spiritually curious, you dive in.
Okay. But Jesus said one thing that we all know. He said, your faith will save you. He didn't say anything about your belief saving you.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, our faith is personal. And our belief can be across the board. And it is for a lot of people. People believe a lot of things. And I'm thinking, what tremendous faith they have to believe that and still have tremendous faith. Because a lot of things don't make sense. They don't fit.
Okay.
But still, they have the faith that's required.
So, as a person lives out their faith, then that's really, like you said, so our faith is what saves us, right?
Right.
So, as we think about that, I know for some traditions, right, if you're not in, then there's going to be an eternal consequence, right? Either you're going to have a great eternal life, or if you get the wrong answers, it's going to be really bad for you. You might spend, eternity in hell, or whatever the notion is. So if I don't follow the Urantia book, is there going to be a bad consequence for me?
Not at all.
Okay.
One of the things it describes in here, that for anyone to continue to live after this world, one thing is required. The faintest flicker of faith will get you to the next world. And once you get there, things change. And then you are more fully informed, because there's so much confusion on this planet, so much rebellion still here, that God wants everyone to have a fair chance to make a decision. So that faintest flicker of faith will get a lot of people to the next world.
Okay, so now, again, you're always saying these things are going to open up another layer. So if I get to the next world, does that mean it's going to be like some kind of reincarnation, or what's that next world like?
Well, the word is incarnation.
Okay, incarnation, okay.
It's not going around in the circle, it's going up. And there's a thing called the ascension plan. We ascend further and further as we follow God's plan. And we have to be willing to follow God's will. They have plans for every individual. They have help along the way.
So when you say they...
The spirit angels.
Okay, gotcha, okay. So like angels, God. Now, when we get to this next level, right, let me ask you this question. Is there like do I have to like give a certain amount of money or pay something to like move us to the next level?
I don't even know if they use money.
Okay, so it's not like a divine...
It's a divine world.
It is a divine world.
And it's much different from what we have here.
Okay. So I go to this next world, and is that the end then, or what?
This is the beginning here.
Okay.
And our development to become perfection is evolving. And we believe in evolution.
Okay.
So you're evolving your soul. And it is very slow, as we know on this world.
Mm-hmm.
Most people change very slowly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It takes a lot of effort. There are billions of advanced worlds and inhabited worlds out there. And there's a certain path to follow to get to paradise. We can talk about paradise. We can see heaven, but we can't see paradise. And that's where we are headed, to be embraced by God when we become perfect. And perfection is attainable.
Okay, so I can get there. I can get to perfection as I walk this spiritual path, this self-improvement path, the path of perfection. But it takes a slow time. I mean, it's a slow progress.
Right. We're talking about a billion and more worlds.
Wow. Okay.
To complete that journey.
So this is not, in my lifetime, quote unquote, in my natural lifetime of 80 or 100 years, we're not talking about reaching perfection.
Oh, no. It's still kindergarten.
Okay, so even at the end, even if I make it to be 99 years old, that's just the kindergarten of spiritual development.
Yes.
So then I go on to the next world and I continue to self-improve, and then I'll just go on and on and on to different worlds, different planets.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Different sections of the universe. Different universes.
Mm-hmm. So this begs. Oh, go ahead.
There's nothing magical about getting to heaven. We're still imperfect. And we start over there where we leave off down here in our development, in our mental development, in our psychological development. And they have plans for everyone to improve and to stay on that path.
Wow.
And it's all based on free will.
Now, when we think about other planets, some people will say, okay, now, George, aliens. Are there aliens?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
If you think about it, there are two mentioned very clearly in the Bible. And one is Christ. He was born as a human, but we believe he was an alien, and that means not from here
Okay.
in that sense. And then there's Melchizedek. Very little is said about him, but he had no lineage, no way they could connect him with any other human. And we believe he was an alien, came here to help revive and save the concept of one God. It was dying out.
Okay, so just like in the book's origin, right, you have a guy who's receiving radio transmissions to share this and to answer these questions. Melchizedek is sent, Christ is sent to bring the truth of the one God in the hope of spiritual perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He was the forerunner for Christ before John the Baptist was.
Okay, so before John the Baptist, if we're thinking in kind of Christian paradigms now, Melchizedek comes first, sets the stage. Later, John the Baptist. Later, Christ. Now, does Urantia say that we're waiting on somebody else? Should we be waiting for another Christ to come?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Christ could come back at any time. We think it may be a while, and that's debatable.
Okay.
They talk about a magisterial son, and that's described in the book. Or it could be another spirit son. But we're due to get one of those sometime.
Okay, so would this be, and not now I'm really getting in the weeds, I'm really asking you some questions now, but will this son be like a ruler also, or just like a religious teacher, or do we know?
Be a religious leader.
Okay.
And he would come to perform a religious task to help get us reconnected with the universe.
And is there something that we're supposed to be, like in the Urantia philosophy, is that something that you as a person who is kind of following this, that you need to be like looking for and counting on, or what is the...
Well, we don't have any good clue about how long that would be in the future, but we can depend on someone coming to offer us more spiritual help.
Okay, so help's on the way, but it's not like you're having to, I'm thinking about those ministers who have like wall charts protecting the end.
No,
it's not like that.
No.
Gotcha, okay. Well, this sounds really highly individual.
It is, and we also promote the idea of religion as a personal relationship between the individual and God. It's a religion of personal experience.
Okay, so really your experience could be different than, your nephews or me or whoever it is.
Oh, yes.
So it's not really a one-size-fits-all.
Well, not unless people wanted to.
Okay.
If they join a church or a movement on this movement, and we don't know if it's a religion or not, but it's a movement. And most of the people that I've met agree with what's in here, so we're on the same page.
Well, I wonder, if it, when you think about your own, describing somebody your own spirituality, do you use a particular label for your own spirituality?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not, how some people can say, I'm a Christian and I'm an Episcopalian, or I am, you don't really use any kind of label.
Well, this information and my spiritual life is Christ-based.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you see yourself as a Christ-based
But
person.
I'm willing to accept truth wherever it's from. And most all religions have a lot of good truth in them and good people. And I'm not very good at discerning which one is which. So.
Yeah, so you're not really trying to say that, like, this is the ultimate way, everything else is wrong.
No.
So you really think there's a lot of truth in all these places and spaces. Sure. So with that...
Well, they're my brothers. They're my spiritual brothers, regardless of their religious background.
So, yeah, which is beautiful, right? Like universal human connection. So in your rancho then, because you've been doing this for, 55 years, where would you say, and I know this is a big question, I'm asking just for a couple lines, but like, how has this most helped you in your own life?
Well, it's easy to understand. I think that it's helped me retain some sanity.
Okay.
In this world, it's a hard world to live in because there's so much mental anguish and loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helped me in that regard. God has helped me to do things that help me create more friends and provide people for me to love that may not have enough love.
Okay.
So it's a continuous thing.
Really, yeah.
Day to day.
But it sounds like...
And to help us get through hard times.
Okay.
And that's part of God's plan. The greatest affliction is to have never been afflicted.
Oh, what a line. The greatest infliction is to not be be afflicted.
Well, if someone is never afflicted, how can they develop compassion and mercy and forgiveness and all those good things?
I mean, fair enough.
Pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important truth right there. I'm curious. This may be a little different, but now I've got you here, right? So I see you as a fount of wisdom. You're an older gentleman now, on the tail end of life as opposed to the beginning, right? And I deal with so many, young people who are on the beginnings, or at least they think they're on the beginnings of their life. And for you, if you were to look back to your 20-year-old self, what kind of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Just keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking.
There's a little story in the book about improving and being better. And it says the best way to become a frog is to live every day as a tadpole. And that's the best we can do. But we have to have the desire to want to improve.
Okay.
We have to keep looking for answers.
And is that something a person can kind of like stir up in their own, or is that given, or how's that work?
It's a combination.
Okay.
Yeah. God has a plan for us, and if we want to, we can find out if we can find it.
Oh. Okay, right, yeah. So clearly it's this mystical connection between us and God, and we have, like you said, we have free will, so we're exercising that, and God also has this plan that God's working out in the world or in the universe, right? Or universes. So if I were listening to this and I would say, okay, you know what? Actually, George, I didn't know anything about your rancher before I got started, but now I want to start. I want to figure this out. What would be step one?
The step one is you have to be open. Your mind has to be open to receive anything.
Okay.
Even love from someone else, your mind has to be open.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to receive thoughts from God, your mind has to be open. There are so many people in this world who have been abused and mistreated.
Mm.
They become angry and sad and lonely. And they can still get out of that if they open their mind and are open to God, whatever their definition is. They can still be helped and hope.
So, okay, let's say, step one, I'm open, check.
You have to be open.
What would be then step two so I want to start getting into this whole your rancho thing. Yeah. What would be my next step?
Give me a call.
Okay, so call George. But would there be like if I just like Googled Urantia, would that?
There are websites available.
Okay, so if I look up Urantia,
Urantia.org. Uh, the what's the other one? SquareCircles.com.
Square Circles, and then would you
Urantia Fellowship.
and would you recommend if a person was spiritually curious, just buy the book and start reading it?
Sure. Yes, and you can read it online. You can listen to it.
Okay.
You can listen to people talking about it on YouTube.
Sure. So as Google, and I could like literally get the book like you did in 1970 at the bookstore. Might be a little easier to get it now, and make that $10 commitment like you made, and get the book and then start reading it.
And that's the second part. You have to be open, and you have to have that desire.
Okay.
And that's the intention.
That's the start. And then would you recommend a person getting into a study group?
Well, there are not many here, but there are some on Zoom.
Okay. So even for a person who might be, and I think that's what's so interesting is people who are geographically isolated. There may just be a handful of people. So like here you are, you're in Pikeville, you're kind of geographically isolated. But you could get on groups and Zoom and learn about it.
Right.
Okay.
In fact, several years ago, the lady in Western Kentucky called me. Somehow she found my name and phone number associated with Urantia. And she had never talked to anyone about it before. And she had found it.
Oh.
And we started talking. We developed a friendship. Well, it's been 6 years or so. And now she has been going to class to learn how to be a teacher of Urantia.
Wow.
And she loves it.
So even in that 6-year window, you've seen, her develop from curious or open to now she wants to learn how to be a teacher.
Yes. And they have a program to teach people how to teach.
Okay. So I guess as we wrap up here, anything else that we should know about you or kind of the unique, vision of Urantia that we should know about?
Well, a couple of things. One of them is, and this is a quote from the book about Christ, says, the greatest, let's see if I can get it started, the greatest, anyway, if anyone does want to find out more about it, if they want a study group, I have several friends, and we're ready to start a study group. And we can start with 3 or 4 or 5.
Gotcha.
And the other is a quote, of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the life of Christ and how he lived it.
So kind of full circle, coming back to this movement is really about Christ.
It is, and growth.
And growth. Now, George, if you were to take this to some churches, they might say this isn't really about Christ. This is kind of false teachings and all that kind of stuff.
I've experienced that.
I bet you have. And what do you say to that?
Very little.
Okay.
Yeah. Spiritually, they're fine where they are and the way they're going. They mean well, they're sincere. They don't have any trouble spiritually.
So you're not trying to pluck people out of their movements?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, people are dropping out already.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need to do that. I need to find the people who've dropped out already.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so people who are open without a tradition, here you are. Mm-hmm. But if you're happy as being an Episcopalian, it's like just do your thing.
Very good.
Now, you raised some really interesting notions of spiritual curiosity, but there's not like an eternal consequence if you don't follow the book. But for you, this has really worked. This has really tried to answer your questions, helped you grow, and here you are, continuing, like you said, you're kind of in the preschool of learning how to love people because you feel like this is a long-term growth and journey. Well, I really appreciate your willingness to kind of live your life in front of other people, to try to commit to loving others, sharing with me, and sharing with our listeners today.
Well, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Appreciate being here, and I appreciate your service.
Jesus,
Absolutely.
please
Okay.
don't be
Well, thanks.
mad.
All right.
I know that it makes you sad when I simply don't know.